I was pushing you away. I was pushing God away. I was pushing all the blessings of the Lord that he'd given to me away and rejecting them. I didn't see it that way. In fact, in those moments, I was like, God, where are you?
Welcome to the Turnaround Marriage Podcast, where biblical wisdom and neuroscience come together to bring hope and healing to struggling Christian couples.
We're Scott and Rachel, a husband and wife team whose proven system has helped hundreds of married Christians go from crisis to closeness quickly without rehashing the past.
Each episode, what we're going to do is just share a real conversation. We're going to also share some of God's truth with you each time. And then also, we want to include practical tools to help you rebuild the marriage that you were created for. No one saw it. And on the outside, it looked like we were fine. I mean, we were smiling, we were faking it. But inside, I just remember feeling so stuck, so bitter, so resentful and angry, and honestly, just broken. And I remember when we started Turnaround Marriage, it was because we knew we weren't the only ones. Smart, capable Christians who were really massively stuck in their marriage, wanting something more, feeling like counseling had failed them. And here's what we wish every couple knew.
Yes, welcome to episode 2 of the Turnaround Marriage Podcast, why we do this and what we wish every couple knew. Rach, looking back, it's amazing because so often this isn't in my forefront of my thinking. So many of those dark days, those times that we went through where it was really hard and things seemed so hopeless. And there we were doing all the traditional helps. We were spending all kinds of time, money, and energy. And we were really, really stuck. Like nobody really saw it. On the outside, we looked perfectly normal, but on the inside, we were wasting away.
Yeah. And I remember going to church and trying to muster up a smile and be everything to everyone and pretend like everything was okay. And I just deep down felt like such a fraud.
Yeah.
I know you did too.
Absolutely.
I mean, it was just such a hopeless time for us. And I just remember also how it seemed to touch every part of our lives.
Yeah.
I mean, it was draining us financially. It was definitely impacting your health for sure, probably my health. Definitely, it had taken such a toll on our happiness. We were just not happy. There was very little joy in our home.
Yeah, our kids really felt it too. I mean, when you say in our home, we're talking about lives here. And, at one time we had 6 kids in our home and every one of them felt it, and it's, of course they did. It's within, in the Lord said, to be fruitful and multiply. And in the context of marriage, what it was speaking back in Genesis was that the marriage would be the vine and the kids would be the fruit of that vine. And if the vine's not healthy, how are they going to be healthy? And I knew that, and they were suffering too.
Yeah, they were. And, it was just such a beautiful thing because when we learned how to take our thoughts captive, when we learned how to shift our emotional state and start looking for solutions rather than just talking about problems, and when our marriage really did heal and we felt that call from God to start Turnaround Marriage, to build something different for Christians. I mean, I remember how scary it was. I remember thinking, okay, can we do this? And it has been so incredible to see that God has really had his hand on us, on our family, on our marriage, and on Turnaround Marriage. And I'd love to just talk about the verses that really God used to inspire and to launch Turnaround Marriage.
It's interesting how God used that Mark 12 passage where the Lord Jesus tells us in Mark 12, and one of the scribes came up and heard them disputing with one another, and seeing that he'd answered them well, asked him, what commandment is the most important of all? And Jesus was so very clear. He answered, the most important is, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind and your strength. And the second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than this. It's very interesting. They didn't ask, what is the number 1 and number 2? They asked, what is the greatest? But Jesus made it so clear that if you are professing to love God, you have to love your neighbor as yourself. And who is your first neighbor? But your spouse. And coming to grips with that and applying it, like I wish somebody even showed me what that meant, what that looked like, how it looked to love God in a practical way, not just with the external, with what people were seeing, but how would we love God in our minds, in our hearts, in our souls, in a way that was developing a closeness with Him, was developing a closeness with you. And we realized that we have to love God with all of our being. And second, we've got to love each other with all of our being. And it's just so close in the mind and the heart of God that we would love our first neighbor simultaneously with how we're loving the Lord. These go hand in hand. And I've got to love my wife well if I'm going to love God well. They go hand in hand.
Yeah, it's such a powerful passage. And Matthew also talks about it in chapter 22. And, it's so interesting. There's so much we could unpack in
Yes.
these few verses. But I remember the day that it dawned on us, and we were looking at the verse, and it was like God just kind of hit us both. I don't even remember how it all came about, but we were looking at it and going, oh my goodness, love the Lord your God with your heart. That's your emotional home. That's where we live emotionally. How can we love God if we're staying in a state of bitterness or anger or resentment? And we're not here to say like there's never a time for that. Of course, there's a time for all things, right? But how can we love God if we're constantly in this state of frustration or disappointment or not
Right.
being grateful for the challenges and the gifts and the good and hard things that God has allowed in our lives, right? And so it was like looking at that and thinking about loving God with our heart. Like, what if we could shift our emotional state? What if we could cultivate a heart of gratitude, of peace in the Lord, of joy, the joy of the Lord, rather than this resentment and bitterness and anger and resentment, And that first part of the commandment is just so powerful, because so many people think, well, I just can't help how I feel. Like, I can't help how I feel. Like, if you knew what we went through, if you knew what my husband did, if you knew how my wife was, like, you would say there's a reason for that. But the beautiful thing is, like, there are so many commandments about what we're to do with our heart, about having self-control, about cultivating the fruit of the Spirit, about having a joy of gratitude, of giving thanks in all things. I mean, we could go on and on about the scriptures that talk about that, but we do really have a choice in how we feel and what we're cultivating.
Yes, it's so important that we remember about our heart. Of course, we think about that when we get married. Of course we do. But where is your heart? What is your heart focused on? What is your heart thinking about? Like, what is the heart is the center of the person. Like, what drives you? What are you focused on? And I know the fear of man, the concern about what people were seeing was far more important. It shouldn't have been, but it was far more important in my mind. And of course, it was way more important that I was close to the Lord and close to you. And the truth is, I was really pushing you away. I was pushing everybody away from me. In fact, I would just even share, I've been very transparent about some of those dark days, but there was one in particular where I remember being in the office, my office. I'd shut the door and nobody knew where I was. And I had pushed you away. I had pushed the kids away. I had pushed people in the church, even family. And it was a dark place, because in those dark moments, I was beating myself up too. I was beating the living snot out of myself, telling myself what a failure I was, what a loser I was, over and over again. And it was like, not just in my heart, I was feeling it in my body too.
Hmm.
Unless someone's been there, it's hard to describe it. It's hard to explain it. But I was laying on the floor, and it was like, it would have been better if someone had punched me and knocked me out. That's how low it was. And in that low spot, the truth is, I didn't see it at that time. The truth is, like, I was pushing you away. I was pushing God away. I was pushing all the blessings of the Lord that He'd given to me away and rejecting them. I didn't see it that way. In fact, in those moments, I was like, God, where are you? Why are you not answering me? Why are you so far away? Why have you allowed my marriage and my family to get to this dark place? I've signed up to be a pastor. I said I'd serve you. Why Why am I in this place now? It doesn't make any sense. But the truth was, I didn't see it. Truth was, I was beating myself up, and I was pushing God away, and I was pushing you away, and I was pushing my family and everyone else around me away too. And the problem was my heart was off.
Wow. It's so not fun reliving that
No.
and remembering back to how it was. And I know it's probably because you were cultivating a heart of disappointment and why
Yeah.
me and poor me and why is my wife like this and why doesn't she understand and all of those kinds of things. And so loving God with our heart, what we have grown to learn is what that really means is cultivating a heart that can give thanks in all situations and circumstances for the good things, the hard things, the things that we desire. And that's one of the very first things that we teach our clients inside of our Turnaround Marriage program is to begin every day with a practice of giving thanks, not just for the good stuff, but for the hard stuff,
Yeah.
for the stuff that also he's put on our heart that we desire,
Right.
those good things that he has in store for us in the future when we can get through the thing that we're facing right now.
Yeah. And right along with the heart, of course, is your mind. And what are you thinking about? What are you engaging in? And I was, as I was hitting on already, I know for sure that I had cultivated, not only that I would say to myself, you're a failure, but I had cultivated living in the lies of the enemy, of beliefs about myself, beliefs about us, beliefs about God that were just not biblical, not true of me, not true of you. And I allowed bitterness to creep into my mind, which obviously was affecting my heart, which really the case in point is all these things are interconnected. But the patterns of my thought were very much in alignment with what the accuser and the liar would want me to believe. I didn't see it that way back then. But now when we realize that the patterns of our mind, it's like a garden. Like if you allow weeds to grow and then you start nourishing them and start trampling on the good plants, is it any surprise that weeds take over? No. And so often when people come to us in their marriage now, when they're struggling, obviously there are usually strong negative patterns, beliefs about themselves. They've actually entertained the enemy's lies. They didn't even realize it oftentimes. Sometimes it looks like self-esteem type stuff. Maybe it's things of the past that they've been beating themselves up over. Maybe it's things that's happened to them and they've bought into the lie of what the enemy would want them to believe, which is you're just rejected by God. He forgot about you. He doesn't care about you. And they're actually cultivating the lies of the enemy instead of the truth of what the Father would say over us and about us. And that's one of the amazing things that we do in our program with what we do working with people is helping them to develop thinking patterns that are in alignment with the heart of God. And when you do, surprise, surprise, everything changes. We've had people say, I've been praying for breakthroughs for 10, 20, 30 years, and I've gotten them here working in Turnaround Marriage.
It's so interesting about the mind and those patterns of thought. And I love the analogy you used about the mind being like a garden, because every thought is a seed. What are we planting? And it's also just a moment of neuroscience for a minute. Our patterns of thinking, these are called neural pathways, and these are kind of like well-worn hiking trails. So the more that somebody uses a trail, the more that they beat that path down and they travel that trail, the more thousands of people over time have beat that trail down, the easier it is to find that trail. It's a path you can easily find. And the same thing is those patterns of thought. The more tens of thousands of times if we've thought certain things like I married the wrong person, or he'll never change, or I guess I'm just not lovable, those types of lies that are really lies from the enemy that we have allowed, cultivated, and then repeated to ourselves, those are like we're trampling the pathways down and basically making it so easy for those thoughts to be the very first thing that we think the minute my husband does something or the minute your wife does something, right? And so what I love, Scott, the work that you have done in your own heart and mind and the work that you get to do and I get to do with honorable Christians who've really been stuck with these negative patterns of thought is showing them how to have the mind of Christ, showing them how to identify those lies, take them captive, and change them
Yeah.
and and then create new neural pathways,
Yeah.
new patterns of thinking. And that's part of how we love God with our mind, is having the mind of Christ.
Yeah, you're so right. And that's one of the things I love to do, because if it's a long held pattern, you might not even be able to see it. And that's where we can come in. And that's where I love to be able to coach people, because people invite me into that space to really lovingly challenge them. Usually people don't have anyone in their world that are gonna lovingly challenge them. And when we're in that space and I can point out those blind spots, and then the Spirit of God will illuminate that even further and just apply that to their heart, it's amazing the changes that can happen. Like I said, we hear all the time, wow, I was stuck there for most of my life.
Mm.
And I've not only been able to break free, but I've seen the Spirit of God bring healing. We often say, like, we don't heal, but we know the healer. And
Amen.
we love to lift him up, his name, because that is what he does. And it's not that God ever withholds that healing for our hearts. It's that we're holding on to other things. We're cultivating something else. We're preventing the Spirit of God. Because if we are listening to the enemy, and then we say, and we're tuning our hearts to enemy FM, and we wonder, why is the Spirit of God not speaking? Well, we've been tuning our hearts and minds to listen to the enemy.
Mm.
Is it any wonder that we're stuck? And of course, that really leads to the soul piece, which is like, if you're cultivating this over time, it is going to lead to a disconnection between you and the Lord. And he is, behold, I stand at the door and knock. Like, he pursues us with his love. He will go leave the 99 to go after the one. Like, in his heart is to pursue us. And that's what he does. And sometimes, the encouragement of getting back to the word of God, getting back to who he is, getting back to some of those routines that really bring connection with God, can bring about such soul saturating healing
Mhm.
that it's really, really powerful. Because if God is not in the center of your marriage, if we've not been praying together, by the way, the statistics of couples that pray together that get divorced is like 1 in 100 or something.
It's 1 in 1,000.
It's 1 in 1,000. Yeah.
It's crazy. Crazy town.
It's so
The
different.
statistics.
Yeah. And so if you're cultivating not just one of you, oftentimes when the marriage is struggling, obviously the husband's called to pick up that mantle of leadership. If they're struggling, he's seeing the disappointment and hurt in his wife's eyes. She tends to lean into the Lord. He tends to go into failure mode or to work mode or something else, but not take up the mantle of leadership that he has. And when there is that healing and he remembers who he is, and they remember together their identity in the Lord, and they reconnect with that, and it's like so powerful. Because I will often say to people, like, I wouldn't tell you to be a better man or a better woman, assuming they're a believer, assuming they're a Christian.
Mhm.
Like, it may be true that you need to repent. It may be true that you need to turn or heal or change or grow. But usually what we need to do is step into who we are already in the finished work of Jesus. When he said it is finished before he bowed his head on the cross, he meant it.
Mm.
There's no more striving that needs to be done in order to connect with the Lord, in order to be right with him. So what we need to do is step into every day who he has declared us to be.
Mhm. And that is such a powerful exercise that every single believer needs to do, because when you are believing lies about who you are in your soul, your very identity, if you're forgetting that you are an image bearer, yes, we are sinners, of course, but we are also dearly loved children,
Right.
daughters and sons of the great high God, the one who is pursued, as you said, Scott. When we can stop believing lies about who we are and step into the new creation that he says we are, and walk in that new obedience, not out of a way to pay him back for being really nice to us, but as a way to live a life of gratitude to the Lord, and as a love offering of sacrificing our life as we live it unto him. When you can do that and step into who you are in Christ and walk in that new creation, man, everything changes in
Yeah.
your home, in your heart, in your marriage, because you're operating from a totally different place of who you're believing that you are. And
Hmm.
I mean, the truth is, like, whether we're believing a truth or a lie, it affects our life as if it's true
Yeah.
because we feel like it's true. That's what Craig Rochelle says in his book. Pastor Craig, he says, if you believe a lie long enough, it will affect your life as if it's true.
Hmm.
So I love that part about loving the Lord with your soul. It's like, who are you? Who are you in Christ? Maybe you're out there. You've suffered from low self-worth all your life. We want to remind you that you are dearly loved,
Hmm.
that you are seen. Elroy, the God who sees, he sees you. He loves you. He chose you. Do not forget that.
Yeah. Yeah. So good, huh? And it's so important that in a Christian marriage, we can't leave God out of the center. Otherwise, we know where it will lead. And, the other piece here that interconnects is our body. When you're really struggling, we used to go to comfort food, and that's what Americans tend to do. We go to the comfort foods, we get into the bad habits. We're not exercising, we're picking up the phone, we're watching TV, and it's having an effect on our bodies.
Mm.
And what we've learned over time is like, especially like we have our gut is our second brain. Our gut, you know way more about this stuff than I do, but it impacts everything. The stuff that we're putting in, we're getting garbage in, garbage out in every way, and certainly with the body too.
Right.
And at our darkest point, I was also really struggling in my body, and to say that I had the anxiety and depression, like the doctors said this over me, gave me the meds, and there was no solution with the drugs. They did not ever get me over the top. They did never bring healing for me, and reality, they began to be part of the problem actually.
Mm.
And it was by God's grace and the right help that I could clear and cleanse and get off of that stuff.
Yeah. And the part we're talking about is loving the Lord your God with your strength.
Yeah.
Because when we think about strength, we think of your physical body, right?
Right.
Having the energy to have a strong marriage, having the physical health to be able to love and serve each other, right? To be able to take care of this temple of the Holy Spirit that God has trusted us with that only lasts for what, 70, 80, maybe 90 or 100 years. We've got to take care of it as it relates to ourselves and our marriage. And I
Yeah.
remember when we were in such fight or flight and our marriage was struggling, and it really did destroy your immune system.
Yeah.
And what we've come to learn is that cortisol pumping through your veins absolutely causes inflammation, and it can inflame your whole body. It can inflame your gut. It can cause headaches, neck aches. It can cause migraines, so many health problems and immune problems and gut problems can develop. We're not saying every health problem you have is because if your marriage is struggling or if you're, not emotionally well, but I'm just saying, like, it does take a toll on your body. And so learning to cultivate and get the good kind of dopamine flowing, feed your gut good food so that that's where your body creates about 90% of the serotonin that our brains need to help us be happy. God designed us this way to take care of this temple he's given us. So learning to love God with our strength really is about taking care of our physical health and also helping our nervous system to come back to a place of peace and rest and digest, not staying in a constant fight or flight.
Yeah, that's so right. And with our bodies, if we are in a place where our marriage is struggling, you might have complications, injuries and sicknesses that come up. But if there is the oxidative stress in your body of a disconnected marriage, like the stress of that, it is literally like a toxin in the body. It is taking a toll and making whatever you have worse. And sometimes it's like the chicken or the egg. Is it the marriage that caused the stress or vice versa? But regardless, unless we get out of that loop, it is hurting you. It is hurting your marriage. And quite honestly, there's no real working on your marriage when you're just sitting and suffering and your body is struggling. And when we began to realize what an impact diet, sleep, external factors, even chemicals that that we're having, the toxins are everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can address these things as much as you can, like holistically, and pretty much everything in the center aisles of the supermarkets in one way or another are either killing you or hurting you in your body. Like it's so true. And obviously that's not true of absolutely everything. But the impact on our body of the foods and the things that are impacting us in the physical body do show up in the marriage, and the marriage issues do show up in our body. So in order to work on your marriage, you actually have to address your body too. Just a case in point, there was one couple I was talking to, and I might have shared this before, people might have heard this before, but they were on a coaching call, and they were saying they kept getting in this argument on the way to church. And I was like, wow, that's the time you don't want to be getting in an argument. And then we realized they were arguing about how much they were going to tithe at church on Sunday. And as we got to the heart of it, I was like, okay, but what's your routine? And we got to the heart of it. They didn't eat breakfast. They had some high sugar coffee running out the door, and they're trying to decide something together on an empty stomach with lots of sugar in their body and in a hurry. Not a good time. It's a recipe for struggle.
Right. Their brain wasn't nourished. And how interesting, isn't it? Something. So that's really the heart of loving God with your heart, mind, soul, and strength is really about loving him with your emotions, with your thoughts, with who you are, and, with honoring him in your physical body. And then that second command is like it. Jesus says to love your neighbor as yourself. And it dawned on us that if we could show people how to do that, because obviously your spouse is your first neighbor. And husbands and wives are wired so differently. Yep. We have different tendencies, different weaknesses, different needs, different ways that we process things. Some are more emotional, some are more logical. There's so many things. It's not as simple as the 5 love languages. Right. And so learning to love your neighbor means I'm going to learn to understand my husband, how he's wired, what he needs. What does the biblical role of husband look like? And what does a biblical wife look like? How can I come alongside him, help him and encourage him, follow him, not nag him and pull him down and criticize him, but be the one to lift him up and lift him up before the Lord? And so that's really the heart of how Turnaround Marriage was birthed many years ago.
Absolutely. And the thing, again, I've hit on this already, but I want to reiterate very clearly. We joke about this with our clients. Almost everybody comes to us and they say, we've got communication problems. And the truth is, you learned how to speak when you were 2. Like the truth
Even
is,
sooner than that.
Yeah, well, whatever. Like
Right.
you learned, it's not a communication problem alone. There might be some tools that you need. You might need to think about what your face is saying as you're talking, and all kinds of aspects of communication that might be part of the factor. But we joke with our clients and we say, oh, like, hey, pass me the talking stick, back and forth, as if that is going to bring the healing and the solution in your marriage. And so often people come to us, and here is the bottom line. I wish someone had told us. And this is also why most of the marriage helps out there do not work, because they're passing the talking stick back and forth. But if you have bitterness in your heart, or if you're beating yourself up at night and you're telling yourself you're a loser, would you want to be married to you? If you're in a place where you're in like depression, like if you are overwhelmed with stress, you have nowhere to put that stress and you're not handling it well. If you're dealing with anger, if you're dealing with betrayal, there's no just working on the marriage unless you also heal physically, emotionally, spiritually. There is no healing the marriage if you are maxed out. It's kind of like this. Like if a big wave hit you, if you're swimming in the ocean and you're underwater, what do? You don't swim because you might be swimming down. You're supposed to rest, allow yourself to not rest, but you're allow yourself to just float to the top. The worst thing you could do is swim. But if in that moment I were to say to you, hey, what's for dinner? That's a question you could not answer because you're in that space of that fight or flight, as you alluded to earlier. How can you make a decision? You can't even think logically when that part of your brain is shut off. And you're not using the logic anymore, which is one of the reasons that we teach people literally to breathe.
Yeah. So one simple thing that you can do if you find yourself constantly stressed around your spouse, if you're constantly nitpicking and in that fight or flight, maybe there's been poor communication or broken trust or so much conflict, or maybe there's been not enough conflict where you just don't even talk about things. There's a lot of silence. One simple thing you can do is learn how to do box breathing. Box breathing is very simple, but what it does is it puts your body back into the parasympathetic state where you can rest and digest, where you can get out of fight or flight, and the back part of your brain can stop ringing those alarm bells, and you can now access the front part of your brain where you can access logic and reasoning and critical thinking. Box breathing is very simple. You can take a 4-second inhale, 4-second hold, 4-second exhale, and a 4-second hold. You can simply cycle back and forth, inhaling for 4, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, and then holding for 4. After just a few rounds of that, you will be shocked at how your body can come back to a place of peace and calm. Now we can access the front part of our brain. Now we can start thinking differently. We can cultivate something different emotionally, right? Now we can take care of ourselves. So box breathing, that's a simple tool that you can use and pull out. That'll really help you.
Yeah, I was able to lower my blood pressure at the dentist once by doing
love
box
it.
breathing. It really does make an impact. It can really, really help you. But that's just one of the many, many tools that we help people to bring into their routine. But if you are not breathing, you can't think, you can't operate. And a lot of times people, when they're really hurting in their marriage, they're not even getting oxygen in their lungs. They're literally suffocating, and their body is feeling like they're drowning. And so there is no working on the marriage until you got oxygen in your heart and in your brain. Of course not. So again, no one ever told us this. The counselor never told us this. I didn't learn it in seminary. Like, these all have to go hand in hand. And most times if you go to get help, they'll say, do you want to work on you or the marriage? And I think that's a foolish thing to ask, because you're one flesh. You have to work on you and the marriage at the exact same time. Of course you do.
Yes, you do. So as we wrap up, we want to encourage you, go ahead and subscribe. Share this podcast with someone who could really benefit from feeling encouraged in their marriage, who could understand the need for thinking differently, feeling differently. Who are you being in your marriage? Taking care of your physical health and learning to love your neighbor as yourself. Maybe someone needs this box breathing technique. We want to encourage you, share the podcast and go to turnaroundmarriage.com to learn more about how to work with us.